Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. It's been a long first month of winter, and we're going to talk everything we can about the Kansas football transfer portal class. It's been a busy month for KU, and look, even going back into the season, you could probably say 6 weeks at this point, but it's been busy for the Kansas football coaching staff as they really build out a portal class to replace 30 seniors that have departed the program, plus a handful of other outgoing transfers. To break it all down, we're joined by Kevin Flaherty. We got a fun format for today, and we're going to do a little bit of a ranking / draft where Kevin and I are going to go back and forth and kind of just pick players, and we'll kind of do a top 10. And I'll have my own kind of top 10 list that I'll put up on fog.net later this week. But I thought that'd be a good way for Kevin and I to break down this class, talk about some of the different players, guys we like. And I'm sure there will be some debate in terms of the actual ranking of where some guys are. But before we get into that, Kevin, the holidays are officially over. We're in the depressing part of winter where there's a lot of snow and ice out, and there's not a lot of holidays to look forward to. So let's look back. How was your Christmas and New Year's, Kevin?
They were both really good. I wound up eating it on the ice really hard, which is rare because I'm pretty much an Eskimo when this stuff hits. I move around really well, but I guess that got to me this year. Overconfidence is an issue, and I did the full on like cartoon like feet overhead fall on our driveway. So yeah, that part wasn't great, but other than that, the holidays were really good. How about you?
Yeah, it was great. Obviously, got to go back to California for a while and spend time with family, which is always super nice. Didn't luck out with the weather. It was very interesting. It was about the same temperature in San Jose as it was here, which is
Oh,
just
that's not
very.
right.
It's not what I'm used to. So it was kind of rainy and gloomy, and here was same temp, maybe sunny. But I'll tell you what, Kevin. Like as someone that is from California, like the snow still has a novelty factor for me.
Yeah.
Like I thoroughly enjoyed watching it come down like a blizzard on Sunday. But the whole shovel and snow thing, I'm like, okay, I did about an hour 15 of it at our apartment complex. And I was like, I'm done. No more snow for the year. I'm good. I've got my novelty level all the way to the top, so I'm ready for spring now officially.
When I lived in Austin, I think it snowed one time, and one of our neighbors was trying to build a snowman, and I had to unfortunately be the one to tell him because they were going to be out there for hours. That it just wasn't the right kind of snow for them to build a snowman. There's different kinds of snow. Yes, there
Yes.
there is absolutely different kinds of snow, and they would have been out there for years trying to build a snowman, and it would not have built a snowman based on that. But yeah, it is kind of fun to see people that aren't used to it really enjoying it. But I guess for those of us snow vets or whatever, it's not nearly as exciting or fun as it used to be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm sure what's going to be a lot of fun is going through this.
Yeah.
So quick format. So Kevin will get the honors as the quote unquote guest of the show. So Kevin will go first. He'll pick a player and we'll talk about him a little bit. Then I'll go second. I'll give my player. Kevin will go and I'll go and we'll go all the way through until we get a top 10. Um, so big picture, we're kind of thinking this ranking is much more, hey, not what are you going to do in 2025, but like, what can you do during your Kansas career?
Yeah.
So there are guys who, maybe are going to probably redshirt in 2025, but you like the addition because of what it can mean big picture in years to come. Cool. You can value that higher, or you can say, hey, this guy's going to be here for 1 year, but he's going to really bring this to offense, defense, special teams, whatever. So it's not super rigid. What we're basing this off of, it is kind of just vibes. Do you like the addition? Where you rank it? So Kevin, without further ado, I'll give you the honors. I think I know where you're going to pick just based off what you put on social media and what you've texted me, but I'll let you pick it. Who you got?
Yeah. I mean, if you follow me on social media, then you're probably pretty aware that this pick's going to be Trey Lathan, the linebacker from West Virginia. There are a few reasons I really like this, Swain. One, major position in need, right? Two, multiple years there. So he has a chance, I think, to be pretty good this year and will certainly be a factor in that linebacker room this year. but also we've seen Kansas linebackers take a jump when they've been in the system for more than 1 year. And so I like his ability to really be a guy in 2026. Downhill linebacker, really 9 tackles for loss is pretty good, especially since I thought Swain, coming off of the broken leg that he had a year ago, I felt like there was some rust to start the year. So I feel like now that he's healthy, he's more confident. I think double-digit tackles for loss is in play. The one thing that I noticed that you mentioned, the Pro Football Focus grade wasn't great. There were plays that if you watch him on a play-by-play basis, where you're kind of like, that doesn't look too good right there.
Yeah.
I think he was put in some bad situations, I think was part of it. I think West Virginia's overall struggles, and you wonder sometimes the confidence level a little bit. When he was playing confident and downhill, it really, really looked good. There were a few other times I think West Virginia's defensive line maybe freelanced is the wrong word for it, but they got out of gaps. And so he maybe ate a block that he wasn't expecting to have to eat. And I think your main concern with this would be he didn't necessarily shake blocks to the extent that you would like him to.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Kevin. I like the addition for KU because you're looking at someone 2 years of eligibility. That's huge. And with what he did at West Virginia, I like that he was used in different ways. He was kind of technically their middle linebacker, the guy that is setting the defense, right? You watch some of the games, he's got the green dot on the back of his helmet. So he's someone that was trusted with that level of communication. For a linebacker room that's going to have some new faces, well, now you've got 2 guys who have kind of that experience as a Mike, right? With Joseph Sipp Jr. And Trey Lathan. I like that aspect of it. For me, like the concerning part is, the PFF numbers aren't great. Say what you want about PFF, like it or hate it, right? It's an aspect, I think, of what you can think of in addition.
Sure.
I think when he played fast and had those flashes of it, you could see it, right? There's against KU, right? He has a great tackle for loss where he tackles Luke Grimm. Like that is a see ball, get ball play. And it felt like a couple times, right? He may be thinking too much. And that comes down to the defense. And I think maybe not knowing what to expect. And look, if you project just to KU, well, you've got kind of a front 4, really 3 guys right now, because you don't know who's going to play strong side defensive end, but 3 guys that you feel pretty good about, right? Defensive tackle, Dean Miller. And so you can think about how this could fit in at KU, and you like it because of the Big 12 experience, played a lot of football. He's going to be more than a season removed from a big leg injury. And you're kind of projecting like, hey, what does this upside look like? And if you want to look back at the PFF grades from the season when he got hurt and the season before, like they're solid. So I think this is a sound addition. For me, Kevin, I had him as my 3rd on the board. And I'm going to take for my pick a different linebacker. I'm going to take Bangally Kamara from South Carolina. KU needs athletes at linebacker, and that has been something that was sorely, sorely missed, I think. Maybe not even had it to begin with. JB Brown, I think, is a solid athlete, much more north-south. Cornell Wheeler, good feel, a step up from Rich Miller. But I think you look what Bangally Kamara can do. And if you go back and watch him play at South Carolina, you see the athleticism, and it matches what you saw in that South Carolina defense. And look, I was really impressed with South Carolina's defense. They've got a defensive end, a freshman, who is an insane freak. But Bangally fit and looked like he wasn't out of place. And I think that type of athleticism is going to be really important. And you look at what he did at Pitt, right? Being a multi-year starter, 120 tackles, 12 tackles for loss over multiple years. Like for me, you take the athleticism, you take the Power 4 production, and then you take someone that in terms of the PFF grades, again, factoring in that is a part of the evaluation or the way I think about it at least. And the PFF grades are really solid, right? You go back to his season at Pitt, right? Graded just under 70. He was an 84 this year at South Carolina. South Carolina wanted to keep him as well, right? Shane Beamer really tried to make sure that Bangally came back if he redshirted, but he wanted a fresh start. So he's my first pick.
Yeah, I like that one. And I think when you look at that group between Sipp, Kamara, and Lathan, there's a chance basically that you have 3 guys playing starter reps because the fact that Lathan can play either spot. Kamara, I think, is sort of that natural will, fits in really well. I like your comparison in athleticism with he and JB Brown, because I do think there's a difference.
Yeah.
When you watch, I hate to tie KU football into KU basketball, but when you watch like Flory Badunga move around as a taller, longer guy, it can look a little awkward, but you see where he gets, how much floor he covers horizontally and laterally. Kamara is kind of a similar way on the football field. When you see the length and the way that he moves laterally, I think it's a different kind of athleticism than JB Brown says. His pit highlights are really, really fun. And to your point, we talked about Trey Lathan, like when it looks good, it looks really good. When Kamara looks good, it looks fantastic. Like it looks like, hey, this guy could get drafted type fantastic. And so I really do think that I texted this to you, but I really do think if you're asking me, hey, who has the best chance to be good next year, I would probably say Lathan. If you're asking me who has the highest ceiling and, hey, all Big 12 first team, who has the best chance to be there, it might be Kamara.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of what I'm basing this off of, is kind of projecting a best case scenario. And I think playing in a role where, maybe he's the will, that's a role where you can come off the edge and do some of those things that he did at Pitt. You can also play in space. And so I'm really interested to see how the linebacker room for KU comes together, because you really do have kind of a little bit of guys that cross over just enough, right?
Yep.
You've got two guys that can play the mic in Lathan and Sipp. You got two guys that can play Will or the Hawk too in Lathan and Bangally Kamara. Like I like what is coming together here, and I think Kamara, right, has a chance to have the highest ceiling. So Kevin, all right, pick number 2 for you, number 3 overall. Who are you going to go with?
All right, I'm going with a guy that I'm guessing you might have had above Trey Lathan, and that's Tyler Mercer, the center from North Texas. I think that he's not going to start at center this year when you have Bryce Foster, obviously, but he's good enough, Swain, that it would not shock me to see him start at guard this year to find a way into one of those guard spots. I do think there's a possibility they still take kind of a plug and play guard starter in the spot opposite Kobe Baines. But the reason I'm taking Tyler Mercer is not for this year, right? It's for the future. When Bryce Foster moves on, this is your center. And I think he has a chance to be in an all Big 12 caliber center, has the ability to play any of those interior spots. For a young guy, is already pretty proven. And so you have a lot of guys in this class, Swain, that are either proven, but they're kind of at the tail ends of their careers, where you have young guys that haven't done it yet. Mercer, I feel like, is maybe the one guy that kind of fits into both categories, where he's a proven commodity, and yet he also has 3 years to play at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is one I don't really understand the grade that, our rankings people gave him. He's not an 85. Like, all right, so we can talk about this, Kevin, right? So how you want to evaluate him? Well, he played as a true freshman at North Texas and produced at a high level. 0 sacks allowed and just 3 pressures. And that's at a North Texas offense that is pretty up-tempo. They throw the ball a lot. Like, this isn't him doing it like, Navy, where they're not really throwing the ball very much, right? There's difference to it. All right, cool. That's fine. Produce at the G5 level. You want to say you're a little skeptical of that. Fine. Well, then why is Miami offering him? Why is Arizona State offering him? Arkansas, right? Like, the offer list backs up that this is a guy that people believe can go and in the long term develop into a Power 4 center, an SEC center, a high-end ACC center. Like, I love the pick for you, Kevin. I think he's someone that, again, long-term, I love the fact that you can look at this edition and say, cool, if he redshirts this year, you got 3 years of him, most likely, as your starting center. That's incredible to have that type of continuity at the center of your offensive line. All right, let's say KU doesn't get another offensive line in the portal like they're looking for. Well, then maybe he does win a starting job at guard. We'll have to see how that plays out, but let's just say he does. Cool. Well, you got a year of experience in the Big 12 at guard. Can he go to center next year? Sure. Could he play at guard again next year? Sure. So I just think this is a really great addition in the fact that he's got experience, he played well, and I think played in an offense that did put up some good numbers. Like, I think this checks a lot of boxes. I think in my ideal perfect scenario for the roster, he redshirts this fall.
Yeah.
Is that how it's going to work out? I don't know. He could show up to campus and just kick butt and be a guy that you can't not play. But I really do, Kevin. I love this addition.
I agree. I think that if Kansas hadn't gotten Lathan in the last day or so, like this would have been my top pick. So I was happy to happy to see him fall to my second pick. How about you? Where are you going with this next one?
All right, so this is going to be my second pick, 4th overall. I'm going to go with Keyan Burnett from Arizona. This is one I'm really high on. Look, I think Mason Fairchild might be one of the more overlooked KU players recently, just because of how I think his freshman year, right, the way he played, and even in like 2021, may influence opinion. But if you look at his senior year, how consistent he was and how important he was to the offense with Jason Bean, and then you look back at this past season where KU had no presence from tight ends, right? And let's be real about it, right? Jared Casey was a fullback that was 6'1", did some good things, but is not a guy you're going to go and target 5 times a game. Trevor Cardell, a good receiving player, but didn't always have the consistent production. Well, if Keyan Burnett can stay healthy, and that's going to be the big if here, he's someone that can provide you with that athleticism to stretch the field from the tight end spot, give you more of a receiving threat, and it provides you some insurance, right? Deshaun Hannick is coming off of one of the worst injuries you can suffer as a football player, right? Snapping your Achilles is serious. And this provides KU with some level of insurance. And let's say Hannick is able to come back and be what he was during, last spring. Man, that's a great 1-2 punch at tight end. And all of a sudden you can get into some, 2 wide receiver, 2 tight end and running back sets, which we haven't seen KU do a lot of. But if you've got 2 really good tight ends, you can do that. And then that takes some pressure off of the wide receivers that I'm sure we'll talk about here in a little bit. But like for me, he checks all the boxes: size, athleticism, production. The question is, can he stay healthy? And if he can, I love the addition. I think he's a guy that can be an all Big 12 tight end.
If you're a Kansas fan, go check out his highlights against Utah, because I think that really shows you what he can be, and basically a wide receiver at the tight end position. And I love your point about being able to play multiple tight ends, because you do have a receiver group that is going to be thrown together really quickly, basically, that weren't here before. And so if Burnett and if Hanukkah can get healthy and somewhat back to where he was, these are guys that could wind up being Jalen Daniels' favorite targets. It would not surprise me if Burnett is able to stay healthy over the course of the season, if he's going to be one of the most targeted tight ends across the Big 12. That would not surprise me at all. And I think that, there are some tight ends that it's like, okay, on 3rd and 6, he can get you 8, type of deal. But with Burnett, he's a guy that can get down the seam. He can pressure a defense vertically. And I think that was something they were missing last year for a few reasons. You mentioned the lack of consistency. I think Cardell was banged up for part of the year too, which
for sure
kind of limited that. It was Leighton Cure's first year in the offense. He's your number 3 guy, and all of a sudden he can become sort of your move guy, H-back, fullback type, which maybe is more along the line of what his skill set is. And then you can bring along a guy like Carson Brune sort of behind those guys. I think that just adding Burnett makes that whole room that much better, and makes the passing attack really have that much more potential.
Yeah, and you remember all the seam routes, right, that Mason Fairchild would run? Well, imagine you take, Fairchild and just juice up the athleticism a little bit, right, and give him a little bit more size and length. Like, that's the type of player you got here. So, again, health is going to be the big key. And I think you could say that for a couple guys here that KU's added who had some injury issues at their past schools. But if he can stay healthy, like I think this is a fantastic addition. All right, Kevin. So for you then, your third pick, 5th overall, who you going with?
Yeah, I'm swinging on potential on this one. Somebody out of that wide receiver room is going to have to catch some passes. And a few of those guys have production at lower levels. I'm going with the guy that didn't produce as much, but played at the highest possible level. And that's Emmanuel Henderson, the wide receiver from Alabama. I think that this is a guy that if you watch the high school tape, Swain, and he was, playing running back in high school,
Mm.
Kind of had a little bit of jet sweep stuff in there too. You can see how dangerous this guy could be after the catch. And I think if you're out there catching, 30 plus yard passes in Alabama, Georgia, you've got a little something to you. And so with him coming in, I think he played at right around, I think 150 snaps or so last year, was Alabama's basically number 4 wide receiver. That doesn't necessarily make you say, okay, this is wide receiver 1. But I think when you look at that group sort of as a whole, a lot of them fill very specific roles, right? I think that, like, for instance, just one guy, you look at Cam Pickett, he's a run after catch guy. He's a guy that you can throw the ball to, on a short hitch. He can maybe break a tackle and make something happen. But I don't think Cam Pickett is necessarily a 50 catch a year guy. I think Emmanuel Henderson could be that guy, Swain. He hasn't played wide receiver for that long, a few years at Alabama. The fact that he was able to break into that group and that rotation the way that he was, now all of a sudden he's getting all kinds of opportunities. I think the runway is cleared for Emmanuel Henderson to be the best out of that wide receiver group this year.
Yeah, I think I wrote about at the time, but like I think he has the biggest range of outcomes.
I agree.
Right? Like he could be your number 1 wide receiver and be an insane player for KU, because you're right. Like the natural God-given talent that he has is insane. And it's, I think, a certain level that KU's not had at wide receiver in a long time. Because let's be real, like I think the guys that KU's had recently, and it is going to be so different to watch guys that aren't, Luke Graham, Lawrence Arnold, Quentin Skinner, because those guys have done it for 3 straight years. But Henderson's got just that natural ability that I don't think any one of those 3 had. And so on one side, Kevin, I totally agree. I think this could totally work out. It could also show that he's not played a lot of snaps at wide receiver. And in that case, fine. He's more of a niche player, but it's still a guy with the speed, size, and athleticism to give you something. So I like it. I think that for a 1-year player to take a swing on in the wide receiver room, I think this is the type of guy you want to swing for ceiling, right? Where you look at maybe the guy I'll hit on next. You can swing for production and what they've done at other places. But I think trying to say, hey, at this point in time, right, KU already had, Levi Wentz and Cam Pickett. Yeah, go swing for the fences. And that's exactly what this is. And so I agree with you, Kevin. I think this has the chance to be a really big addition for KU.
Yeah, I think that he's got a chance to be able to do everything they want him to do, whereas a lot of the other wide receivers, even if they're going to have really plus outcomes, it's in one specific area. Like it's, hey, this guy's going to be a vertical threat, but maybe he's not going to catch 50 passes. Hey, this guy is going to be, a jet sweep, run after catch guy. I think Henderson can kind of do all of it. And you look at the high school stuff for maybe having the most indicators for his athleticism and things like that. He was the number 2 running back in the country, right? And so, if you're looking for a run after catch guy, yeah, he could probably give you that part. I also liked in the limited snaps that we were able to see him at Alabama. I didn't think he looked off. As weird as that sounds, like some guys, you see them playing wide receiver if they haven't done it very much and they look really raw and maybe their route running isn't great. I didn't see that necessarily. And so I'm interested to see, this spring in particular, like, hey, what do we see from this guy? And is he able to take all those extra reps, all those extra opportunities and run with it? Because somebody's going to have to.
Yeah, somebody is going to have to, Kevin. That's good analysis. All right, so my next pick then, number 6 overall. My third pick, I'm going to take Bryson Canty from
Love it.
Columbia.
Yeah.
Look, if you're going to project guys from lower level coming up, personally, I value multi-year production. I think that's super important. Did you do it consistently at your last school? Do you know how to go in and week out over multiple seasons and do it? And that's exactly what Bryson Canty is. You know, you can look at like the stats from this past season, right? They're super impressive. Here's what I love: 100 catches for 1,600 yards in his career. And if he hadn't gotten hurt during the 2023 season, I mean, we're talking about another, 40, 50 catch season for 700 yards. That's what he was pacing for. So I think you look at the stats, right? Checks all the boxes there. Again, some of the PFF numbers I think are really solid for, playing in the Ivy League. And the thing that I love the most about some of the numbers, which are pretty crazy, Kevin, is his receiving grade on throws kind of 10 plus yards down the field, right? Grades out at a 94 on medium passes, so 10 to 19 yards. He grades out as a 99.7 on throws 20 plus yards down the field. That shows you that he is making really good catches. And I just think you look at what he can bring you. He can bring you some deep speed. He can bring you the ability to create separation on some slants, things like that. He's a well-rounded wide receiver. Is he going to beat you in a foot race? He's not Quentin Skinner, but he's got enough speed. He's got enough production, and he's a proven pass catcher. And so I think that combine it all, I think it's a really good addition. The only part that gives me some pause here is the fact that he is a summer enrollee.
Yeah.
He's going to graduate from Columbia. That's freaking awesome for him. It's a bummer for KU that he's not going to be around for spring practice.
Yeah.
And now, yes, over the summer, he and Jalen can work on stuff. And I think the fact that Jalen, if everything goes right, KU will hope that Jalen is not limited in any way, shape, or form all offseason. And he can take as many reps as he wants during spring, but more importantly, as many reps as possible during some of those 7-on-7 stuff over the summer and into, fall camp, where he and Bryson Canty can spend a bunch of time together just running routes and throwing and catching. And so I think this is the guy that is probably going to start for KU at one of the wide receiver spots.
Yep.
And I think he's got a chance to be maybe the most consistent out of the room.
It's funny you saying that he's not Quentin Skinner, because that's the role that I see him kind of fitting in this team. Not necessarily, hey, he's not 6'4". I don't know that his raw speed is as good as Skinner's. But I think if you're asking me who's the deep threat out of this group, it's Bryson Canty. And it's more than just the grade. I think I agree with your point on the speed. I think where his speed plays up is – it's not necessarily the initial part. It's not necessarily the end part. It's the middle part, where after he's taken off a little bit, he gets on top of defensive backs really, really well. And so he has an ability to lose guys. I think he's a more natural catcher than Quentin Skinner is. He tracks the ball better than Quentin Skinner does. And so there are some advantages he has there. But I think that he fills, if you're looking at the wide receiver room from the quote-unquote archetypes from a year ago in terms of, hey, do you have a contested catch guy like LJ Arnold? I don't know that they have a guy as good as LJ is, but I think Levi Wentz is kind of that contested catch guy. If you're asking, hey, who's going to be Luke Grimm, as weird as it sounds, it might be Doug Emillion. Not that he's going to catch that many passes, but that he could wind up filling that role. You would also have Cam Pickett, doing some things in there. The guy that I feel like is going to be the vertical threat that is going to get downfield, have the throws for Jalen Daniels to really try and throw those one-play touchdowns. I think it's Bryson Canty, 2-time first-team All-Ivy. And so, but I do think there is a level of polish there, like you said, that's above the other wide receivers that they brought in. But I really like his ability to continue to be a vertical threat. He averaged like 18 yards a catch.
Yeah.
Year.
Well, yeah. Like, so the yards per catch numbers, like when you factor in that he also caught 40 passes, right?
Yeah.
He had over 100 catches, like for a career, 16 yards per catch.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty good. So, yeah, I think, Kevin, like, I think Canty and Henderson can provide that deep threat.
Yeah.
I think those two combined will probably fill that kind of Quentin Skinner mold. And I think also, like, it's a different time now, right? And so I'm sure they're going to think of things different ways, and maybe it isn't so, well, this is how they played it last year, so this is how they're going to play it again. I'm sure there's going to be some different aspects of the way they try and use guys, and I think having, Zabrowski, Lubick, Terrence Samuel, all that, like the continuity, I think will allow for some stuff to potentially just evolve. All right, Kevin, let's get to your next pick here. I think this would be number 7 overall, your 4th pick. I don't know where you're going with this one now, so this is going to be really interesting. So who are you going to go with?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a guy that, when healthy, is, I feel like, a proven Big 12 starter, and that's Lyrik Rawls, a guy that they needed help in that safety room with Marvin Grant and O.J. Burrows moving on. Lyrik Rawls is a guy that I think, not that he's Marvin Grant, because I think Marvin Grant had a really great skill set that made him really good. But I think Lyrik is a guy that can play some of that boundary safety, but could also be a guy that plays the Cinco. And I think, when you're looking at the Hawk spot, when it's a quote unquote more of a linebacker versus the Cinco spot, I think Lyrik is more of the Cinco. I think the Hawk will be interesting because you took Bangally Kamara. I think there's a chance that Kansas could wind up going with all 3 of the transfer linebackers with Kamara in that Hawk spot.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to push Jason Gilliam for reps there for sure. But I think Lyrik's versatility, he definitely has a spot there. I know the dyes are kind of polarizing, I realize, on the boards. The one thing I would say is, don't judge those guys based on last year. They were so rarely healthy that I think that we didn't get a chance to really see them when they were healthy. We saw them in the spring and stuff, Swain, and in the limited amounts of practice that we got to see in the fall. I think there is a chance that the dyes wind up having a bounce back year or whatever. But I still have a hard time looking at Lyrik Rawls, looking at how good it looked at times at Oklahoma State for him, and not seeing him have a role in the secondary and potentially at Cinco.
Yeah, exactly. I think, again, health is going to be huge for him here. Basically, if you take the amount of snaps he played during his Oklahoma State career, it's worth 1 season of like Marvin Grant's level of snaps.
Yeah.
And if Marvin Grant finished last year with 67 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, you'd be like, it's a great season. And so I think for him, it's going to be about, can you continue that production that you've shown when you've played? When you've played, you've been productive. Can you continue that? And so if he's healthy, I think you're right. I think he's someone that's going to play a lot. The safety room, it's been a discussion on the message boards. They're trying to figure out how this is going to look. I think there's going to be an element of experimenting, and I think they're going to try some different stuff. And I think you're right. Like, I think the skill set he offers you in terms of someone that can play in the box, that can play in space, like maybe he does end up being the Cinco. And so I think that's a good addition. I think it's one that health is going to be the biggest key here, because it was an issue over multiple seasons. Obviously, he had a season-ending injury in 2023. So I think it's a very sound pick. So I can go a couple different places here, Kevin.
Yeah.
Because now I'm in the point where a lot of this is very splitting hairs, I think. I think before Christmas, I think I put Gage Keys in this spot for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to move him down 1 just because opinions change right over time. I'm going to take Joseph Sipp Jr. next.
Yep.
Because, again, production and multiple years of production. And first of all, so I'm sitting at dinner with family, and the Bowling Green game was on like the background. And all of a sudden I see number 3 running around. I'm like, wait, what? Is that Joseph Sipp playing in the bowl game? And I had like a double take, because you don't hear about that very often, of guys in the portal who have signed elsewhere playing in the bowl game. But I think first of all, that shows the relationship I think he's got at Bowling Green, and I think KU probably feels pretty good after JB Brown, and how that worked out. So for Sipp, though, he is someone that I think, first of all, brings you the physicality that you want from that middle linebacker spot. He is a wrecking ball. And I think for him playing as a north to south linebacker, I think that fits. And look, he's going to have to play east to west. That's a factor of playing in the Big 12. But I think as someone that can play the middle linebacker spot, and can you just be in the right gap? That's something that I think KU had such a hard time with that linebacker this past year, was just guys out of gaps, multiple games, multiple players, just in the wrong spot. And watching Sipp play in the bowl game and other games that I've been able to watch of Bowling Green, like, you can see that he understands where his job is and he is there. And so I think for KU, you look at what he can offer you as a middle linebacker. I think, potentially will start. Obviously, it's so hard to tell with KU and the linebackers because there's a lot that's going to have to be figured out when you got talented players and some other guys, underclassmen, and even older guys like Jason Gilliam who want to fight for spots. But for me, multiple years of production, had a really strong year this year, had other Big 12 offers. Like, it just checks a lot of boxes for me and what you want in a portal guy. So for me, I really like Joseph Sipp Jr.
Great blitzer, too. I mean, a guy that you can get pass rush out of at the middle linebacker spot, which when you're looking at this year's KU team, obviously, who's going to be the strong side end is a mystery. We don't know yet. That person probably is not a Jayhawk yet. And so there is some mystery about where your pass rush is going to come from. Last year, we saw Kansas having to turn to that second level to get pressure, maybe more times than they would like. Sipp's a guy that does that pretty well, I think. The other thing, Swain, that I would mention, you have a great point about him being in the right place at the right time, understanding his assignment. Don't underestimate how important it could be with a whole new linebacker room, basically, for him to get other people aligned to. And if he's doing that, if he can be the Rich Miller, Cornell Wheeler guy of not just knowing where he needs to be, but also where other people need to be and where they need to be lined up, especially with, Kamara coming in new, with Lathan coming in new, even if somebody jumps up that's already on the team and joins that group, the ability that Sipp has to maybe understand the assignments early and get other people lined up as well could also lead for him to be a mainstay. But no, I really like the pick. I think because the Big 12 is played so horizontally at times, sometimes we overlook how important it is to have a linebacker who can just handle himself within the tackle box and make plays with physicality in there. Because the whole plan is to get you spread out and then hit you, at the shortest point of attack. Having a guy like Sipp at middle linebacker, I think, really deters that. And I think it says a lot about Kansas, quote unquote, understanding the assignment that that we picked all three linebackers in this thing. So it shows obviously the need that they had at that position, but also the job that they did in the portal to fill those needs.
Yeah, for real, Kevin. Like, three players that you're like, it's going to create a really solid room. Now, guys are going to have to get better, right? They're going to have to be coached up. Like, there's all the caveats, but like on paper, you look at the linebacker room and you feel really good about it. And I think the fact that a guy that was first team All MAC, 75 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, the fact that he's a third linebacker you mentioned,
Yep.
in kind of an exercise like this, I think speaks volumes about the work that KU did with that position room. All right, Kevin, we're getting down the home stretch here. I think you got one pick left.
Yeah. This is a tough one because I think there are some high upside guys. I think there are guys that are likely to plug in the lineup, but I'm going to go a little bit maybe off the beaten path and go with Laith Marjan, the kicker from South Alabama. Kansas's special teams have to get better. They just I'm not. If you're listening to this podcast, I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. But you look at it, and I hate to bring up previous losses, the losses to Kansas State, you can basically put on special teams a lot of it the last few years. You have the blocked extra point 2 years ago that means that on your final offensive possession, you have to go for a touchdown rather than just kicking the field goal to tie. Last year, K-State hits a 51-yarder, to put themselves up. And obviously Kansas had some other special teams mistakes in that one. And it's not just about K-State. All of that is just to say, in the Big 12 Swain, we talk about it so often, the margins are so thin. You're talking about games that are all separated by a score here or there.
Mm.
Having a plug and play kicker like this, who's not just a proven kicker, but one of the best kickers in the entire country, to come in where you can rely on that consistency and feel great about, hey, we're going to get a field goal here. This is going to work out, I think is going to be a really, really big deal. And so that's why I'm going with Marjan at this spot.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick, Kevin. I really do, because first of all, there are a couple things, right? Obviously K-State, you're right, but you can look at the Baylor game.
Yeah.
How different does that game feel early on if KU makes some of the field goals, right? And I feel like a good field goal kicker gives your team confidence, because the offense doesn't feel like on third down in kind of mid-tier field goal range, like, oh God, like we got to get a first down or else we're screwed. We're not getting any points. The fact that, you look at I can't remember exactly what he was, but I think he missed one kick between 30 and 50 yards. That's a huge confidence boost for an offense. And I think just for a team overall to have that kind of weapon. And now I'm sure fans will say, well, didn't Seth Keller have a great record? Yeah, Seth Keller was also 5'5" and had low kicks. So, I walked by I walked by him at the basketball game when I was going to take photos, and I didn't realize who he was at first. I was like, oh, who this guy is. And I saw him later. I was like, oh my God, he's the kicker. He is easily 6'2". Like, he's a huge dude. And so I think this is something for KU. It's a great addition. I think it's one that KU just needs a field goal kicker that can be steady. And based on what he did at South Alabama, like, he is the definition of steady. And look, KU is going to hope that they don't kick field goals, right? Because this past year, for most of the season, KU did a great job. When KU was in the red zone, they scored touchdowns. They're going to hope that continues. But those times when you're kind of like the 30 or the 35 even, like, do you have a guy that you're like, okay, let's say YOLO and let's try a 52-yarder? Well, you got a kicker now that can do that. I think that's a pretty important aspect if you want to be a complete football team.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it also impacts the way that you're able to play things at the end of halves. There are a lot of different things that go into it when you're confident in your kicker being able to add points. And so, to your point, yeah, I mean, obviously you'd love to score touchdowns every time you're in the red zone, but at the same time, if you're facing, say, a 3rd and 18 and you're at the 35, you don't have to risk a turnover necessarily, when you can say, hey, let's get something to make this kick a little more manageable, because our kicker is going to give us points out of a bad situation.
Exactly. All right. Now we come down to my last one. So so I mentioned Gage earlier, and I've also got Jaleel Hurley here. I'm going to go with Gage as my last pick here.
Hurley was the guy that I was torn between as well on the Marjan pick. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you want to know what here? Real quick, I'll say this about Jaleel Hurley. Like, I'm a little scarred by the Demarius McGee thing and the way that's gone. What gives me more confidence in this is not the fact that, so like when Demarius McGee got to campus, right, he's 170 pounds. And if that, like, got to put on what you got to get stronger. You got to put in a lot of work in the weight room, and then you have to develop on the field. In terms of physical traits and attributes, like, Jaleel Hurley's going to walk off the bus looking like he can start. It's just a question of, can he get coached up? And I think the one benefit for him, and this is something I've mentioned to, VIP subscribers and stuff, is like, DK McDonald is known more as a guy that is a good football coach, right? You talk to people that have kids on the team. They say he's a good coach. You talk to people at Iowa State who worked with him when they came up with the 3-3-5, right? The fact that they taught that in the span of, a bye week says a lot about who he is as a coach and a teacher. And so you're looking at Jaleel Hurley getting to Kansas. And I think it has a chance to work out, but I'm just a little, I got some reservations about it just because of what's happened in the past.
Yeah, and I think them bringing in DJ Graham, casts a little bit of shadow on sort of what Hurley will be this year as well,
sure.
because I think DJ Graham's experience, he's played at a high level at Oklahoma, et cetera. He feels like he's more in line to win that spot, sort of opposite Jalen Todd in that cornerback room. It would not surprise me, though, and this may even be best case scenario, Swain, if Graham comes in, starts for, say, the first half to 3/4 of the year, and Hurley winds up getting sort of more and more reps and potentially even winning a starting spot there.
Yeah. And that's a huge reason, right? Like, he's got 3 years left. Like, that's a huge thing here, is the fact that, if you get 2 years out of him as a starting player, that's great. If you get 3 years all of a sudden, or 2.5, like, that's a great position to be in as well for an addition like this. So I think that's good. But okay. So for my last, without further ado, let's talk about Gage. So one of the reasons why I like this addition for a couple of reasons. First of all, someone that's familiar with the program. You hear about this with transfers. It takes them a minute to get used to practice at Kansas because everything is so up tempo and they move fast and there's a lot of reps and there's a lot of stuff going on around you. You have to be really focused during practice. And that can be an acclimation for transfers. And why I like this is the fact that Gage is going to walk on campus knowing what the weight room program is going to be like, what Coach Gildersleeve's like. He's going to know what practice is like. He's going to know how Jim Panagos coaches the guys. And he did not play at Auburn. And that is going to be something he's going to have to work through, because not playing football in competitive games for a year is not going to help you. And so that part, getting back to the level, so to speak, is going to be a part of his process. But I think the fact that you're looking at him and he knows the scheme, he knows the coaches, he knows everything about the program, he can get on campus and just focus on getting better at football and not having to worry about all the other acclimation stuff that happens when you're a transfer. And so you look at the rotation this year, he may not start. He might start. It doesn't really matter because KU rotates the defensive tackles so much. He's someone that's going to be productive, that can provide you the athleticism you want to see from KU. You think about the combinations that KU can have, right? You can roll out there with Blake, Harold, and Gage. You can roll out there with Gage and Tommy or DJ. Like, you can make a lot of these combinations with Gage on the field and with all the other guys that it rounds out what I think could be the best defensive tackles room Kansas has had in a long time. And then that's before you talk about the fact that, he believes he's going to get a medical red shirt from his time at Minnesota. Yeah. So he could have 2 seasons of college left. And if that's the case, then this is like a home run type of addition because of the fact that KU loses Tommy and DJ after this year and Keenan Caldwell. So you're losing 3 defensive tackles. Well, if you look to 2026 and you've got Gage Keys and Blake Harold back, well, then maybe Marcus Calvin takes a jump. And then you got to go in the portal and say you get 2 guys, maybe one's a starter level and one's a backup type of guy. That's totally manageable. So for me, like, the Gage Keys edition checks a lot of boxes. And I think for him, it's going to be about how much can he get back to his old self and how quickly can he do it.
I want to hit you with a hypothetical really quickly.
I like those.
So Blake Harold, both of us feel like it is kind of a blooming star and was a guy that got mentioned a lot last year as being Kansas's best interior pass rusher. If Gage Keys had not gone to Auburn, could he have had the season last year that Blake Harold could have? I think he could have, because when you look at where Gage Keys was coming off of 2023, I think that by the end of the year, you were seeing the pass rush flashes and the athleticism and things that you were talking about. I don't think he got any sacks, but you were seeing him, move the pocket forcing quarterbacks into different spots. You were seeing the light bulb come on, so to
Yeah.
speak. Do you think that he could have had the year last year that Blake Harrell had if he had stayed at Kansas?
Yeah, I think so, because he would have had the opportunity to build on it, right? You look at his
Yeah.
best games. His best games were at the end of the year. I've got the photo of the Cincinnati game here. That was his best game.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think over the course of the year, you saw that trend line continue up, and it was kind of exponential at the end of the year. And you bring up Blake Harrell, and I think obviously if Gage sticks around last year, KU doesn't get Javier Derek.
Yeah.
That there's no need for a portal defensive tackle. There's still a spot for someone like Blake Harrell to come through if Gage had stuck around. But yeah, I think he would have had a really good year last year
I
had he
agree.
stuck around, just because of, again, when you play games, you can continue to, right? You can get better in practice, but doing it in the games is different. And this was the first time 2022 or 2023 was the first time that Gage had played a lot of college.
Yeah.
And so, it's one of those things where I think he would have had a good year if he had stayed. He decided to, go get paid, and kudos to him for getting paid, because it's, your clock on making money on college football isn't unlimited. Wait, well, I mean, maybe it is unlimited now. Who the heck knows about that?
Yeah.
But so I think for KU, right, this is a really good addition to the defensive line and the defensive tackles room.
Yeah, yeah, and I think to your point about the versatility it gives them in that room, like you said, 4 guys are going to play starter snaps basically, or if you want to look at it a different way, none of the 4 will play starter snaps because they'll all be spread out probably.
Yeah.
But you can put him on the field with a bigger guy like Tommy Dunn, who's more of a nose tackle type. Or on third down, if you decided to be more of a situational thing, and Brian Borland really wasn't. I'm interested to see if DK McDonald, NFL teams do that all the time, right? Like where you've got guys that come in on 3rd and 8, and that's part of their job. I'm interested to see if we see more situational subs with DK McDonald, if that's a change that we wind up seeing. You could roll out there in passing situations with Gage Keys next to Blake Harrell. And considering you're wondering a little bit where all your pass rush is going to come from, that's a really good interior pass rushing group to be able to have out there. And so the versatility that he has, I love your point about his familiarity in the program, his familiarity with school and everything too. You talk to basketball coaches sometimes about transfers, and one of the things that they'll tell you is like, if guy has a bad day at practice, he doesn't know where to go to unwind, right? Like he doesn't have his quiet spot on campus that he knows that he can get away from everything for a little while. He doesn't have his favorite restaurants that he knows that he wants to go to or whatever else. Gage Keys has all of that. He's been at Kansas academically. He's been in the program, in the weight room, all of those different things. And so it almost feels like cheating to include him because he's a former Jayhawk. But I love you picking him because I really think that he's a guy that we have a pretty good idea that the outcome is going to be positive. And I do think that if he gets that extra year, the combination of him and Blake Harrell in 2026 could be really nasty.
Yeah, it could. It could. So let's take a step back here, Kevin, then, and we can talk about looking ahead. So KU's obviously still active in the portal. Things have moved faster than ever before in the portal, where typically, right, in years past, right, there's been plenty of visits going into mid-January.
Yeah.
Things are a lot slower right now because of the fact that everyone kind of got in the portal as soon as possible and got to their spot. So KU's still out looking for more players, but I mean, what's like your biggest need question mark you have for KU kind of trying to finish off this portal class?
Yeah, I mean, if KU's game kicked off today, I don't know that they'd have a strong side defensive end. Like I think that's the one that kind of stands out the most. I know I don't think I'm giving away premium content because it was premium, but it was like Christmas.
You're good.
I know on your early projected depth chart, you had like Dylan Brooks as like a potential strong side, but that's not even like his. Like he's more of a weak side guy. By Job would maybe be your strong side guy, but he's more of a weak side guy. The point is just they don't have that guy on roster right now, and so I think that stands out a lot. Obviously, we've talked about they're looking at some spots that I don't want to say would be luxuries necessarily, but you would love to have an offensive guard that has 25 career starts already to join that group. You would love to have another wide receiver to join that group. You'd love to maybe even have another cornerback to join that group. I guess the other big one, like strong side defensive end, would be punter, right? Like that would be the other question. But I think that until Kansas goes into week one without a punter, I don't know that that's one that everybody's going to be terrified about necessarily.
Yeah, punter, I'm kind of like, look, do you have one by August 1st? That's kind of my opinion on it. Do they need one for spring practice? No, not really. You're not like
Daniels quick kick.
Like, you don't need it. I think, Kevin, you nailed it. I think the two biggest needs right now are strong side defensive end and offensive line.
Yeah.
I think they need one more, whether it be a guy that can play tackle or a guy that can play guard, one other experienced player to come in who's got multiple years of starting experience or just a year of starting experience, something to be able to come in and really bolster. Because you look at what KU's done, and they've really rejuvenated the underclassmen part of the roster with this transfer class. What you need is kind of a plug and play guy, someone that can come in and play and has 1, maybe 2 years left, right? That's what you're looking for. That's a need. And then strong side defensive end. I think Dylan Brooks could play it. Look, Austin Booker playing at 240, 245. Like, you don't need to be Jeremy Robinson or Dylan Woodkey 260 to go play on that side of the defense. Yeah, I think by Job, he played it, or he was up at like 250 something at Michigan State. They got him down at KU down in, I think, the low 240s or
somewhere.
I can't remember, something like that.
Yeah.
So like theoretically, but again, we're talking in theories here.
Yeah.
Can Dylan Brooks do it coming off an injury when he didn't play all last year? Can By Job put it together when he really didn't play a ton during the first half of the season, but showed flashes during the second part? Like,
what do you get from Dak Brinkley? Like, it's there's a lot of those questions out there, and similar on the offensive line, right? I liked Kansas's 2024 offensive line class. The guys who all redshirted this year. Are any of those? I'm not saying any of them will start, but are any of them even good enough to hop on the 2 deep this year? And if so, is that a guy that you're circling and saying, okay, this guy is kind of fast tracked? I think they're. Yeah. We talked all episode about the transfers. I think the other really intriguing thing about this year's team is which of those 2023 recruits, which of the 2024 recruits are all of a sudden putting themselves on the 2 deep and in a position to play a lot. Is Logan Brantley out there at linebacker? Like, guys like that, John Kamara had a long way to go, but maybe there's a spot for some Hawk reps in there if he makes a major jump. And the question is, how many of these guys are going to make a major jump? Usually you see a couple, but who's it going to be? Is Austin Alexander going to join that group of cornerbacks? I don't know. I'm saying there are opportunities for different guys to jump in there. I think the starters are going to be interesting, but I also think the 2 deep will be something that I'll be combing that second team too for the young guys to see which of those guys are maybe putting themselves in a position to play, not just this year, but into the future.
Yeah, it's development time. Right. Yeah. That's honestly what this season is going to be about. Can you develop the transfers? Yep. Can you develop the players that were already in your program? And so for KU, right, you look over the last couple of years, they've done it, right? There were Les Miles recruits, but those guys have been developed. And I think you're starting to see some of those high school kids from the Blake Harolds of the world, the Taylor Davises of the world, who have started to show it. And now it's about the next kind of wave of guys. Can they do it? And look, you're not going to hit on every single high school evaluation. I think big picture these days, you're hoping you hit on 55% of your high school evaluations, and can you hit on 75% of your portal evaluations? And so that's what I think this season's going to be about, right? You're going to find out, you added this many transfers, and a lot of them are at spots where you're like, they're going to play and you're going to see, so I think you're right though. This is a very much a year, not a developmental year, but a year that shows the development of these players. And so it's going to make for a really interesting spring, really interesting fall camp. Like, it's so many new faces and a lot of new stories to tell and all that stuff. So it's exciting to look forward and say, you look at what they did in the portal and you could say KU is going to be competitive this fall, right?
Yeah.
Will they get the win? Like, who knows? But the makings are there for this to be a competitive year again. And I think that's what makes it exciting, is trying to figure out then how does this all come together. And that's the fun part about, I think, to some degree, football this day and age, is the fact that it starts in January. Yeah. And it's all about how does the whole thing come together by the time August gets there, and then, each month getting better. So it's going to be an interesting few months. That's for dang sure.
Yeah. And you've made the point before too, about how Lance Leipold doesn't just hand these guys anything, the transfers coming in. Yeah. And so there's somebody that maybe we're not talking about right now that's going to look in that room, see 2 or 3 transfers in that room, and they're going to step up their game, and they're going to wind up playing over maybe a transfer who appeared to have an easy route. Like Demarius McGee played last year. Is Demarius McGee all of a sudden going to take that next step? There's going to be somebody like that steps up where you say, okay, yes, you added a transfer in my room, but I've been here long enough. They have to beat me out, and I'm not going to let them beat me out. And so I think, if you bring in another offensive lineman, does Amir Herring become a guy that beats out somebody for an interior spot? I think there are possibilities there, and that'll be the fun thing about this spring. Is I do think there's still a lot of questions to be answered, even with such a big, transfer class coming in.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be crazy. We got plenty of other kind of portal wrap up content. You got to kind of try and thread the needle here, Kevin. There's still some stuff that can happen. We're keeping obviously our subscribers up to date on all that, but as things kind of start to wind down, we'll get a lot of more portal recap. I'll do my own ranking of portal players. We'll do grades for each position group. Like, I've got some fun stuff we've got planned for subscribers, so make sure you're checking that out. Kevin, any final thoughts on portal, on any final thoughts, period?
No, I don't know that in this class there's a Logan Brown. And I realized that Logan Brown was a guy that came in before the overall portal window because of his dismissal at Wisconsin. And he didn't play his first year because of injury. But Logan Brown was a guy that when he came in, you said, this guy's a no doubt, absolute, probable stud starter on the offensive line. And I don't know that there's a single guy in this class that I circle and say, this guy is among the top 2 or 3 guys in the class at his position. Marjan maybe being the exception at kicker. But overall, I think they went out with a lot of needs to fill because of that big senior class leaving. And for the most part, Swain, I feel like not only did they fill them, but they did a pretty good job of filling those spots with guys who have a chance to succeed within Kansas's scheme and framework.
Yeah, I totally agree, Kevin. All right, man. That was great. I mean, over an hour. I thought going in, I'm like, all right, cool. 45 minutes. This will be super quick, and here we are an hour and 5 minutes later. Thanks as always for listening to the Fog.net podcast. If you like what you heard, please leave a rating and review on the podcast platform of your choice. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Plenty more content coming your way. Basketball season's fully underway. We're recording this on Wednesday, so be it on Fieldhouse later tonight. Always fresh content on the YouTube channel. And thanks as always for watching. Thanks, Kevin, for doing this. And of course, if you're not already subscribing, make sure you subscribe to the Pay Heed podcast. You subscribe to Verbal Commitment. Those are the 2 podcasts with KC Sports Network that Kevin's doing. Make sure you're checking those out and give them some love on those YouTube channels as well. So thanks as always for listening. We'll talk to y'all again soon.